Is Galbrena going to be huge power creep? Let's talk about it. My name is Juice, and let's get into it. So, is she going to power creep any characters, and is she going to be a substantial upgrade in any particular areas? Well, I suppose we should start by looking at her attribute. She's a fusion character, so that means that if she's going to be power creeping anybody, it's going to be in the fusion category. There's a couple of ways that you would play fusion teams. There's of course triple fusion, there's DPS brand, and there's encore teams. I have no doubt in my mind that Galbrena is obviously going to be better than Encore. She is a good DPS, I'm not trying to downplay Encore here, it's just that she's a standard 1-point dex DPS, Galbrena is a 2-point dex DPS that's going to be releasing soon. I think the answer is pretty obvious as to who's going to be better. That is just something that goes without saying, to be honest. But let's focus more on the limited fusion characters. Is she going to be replacing anybody in triple fusion? Well, I do think that if you have the full team core, you don't really have to get Galbrena because it's still going to stay really strong. However, I will say, if you want to upgrade your triple fusion team, that's a different story, because I do actually think she could realistically replace Chang-Li in this team. Now, do I think she would replace the other two? No, not particularly. I think that Lupa and Brent Wuthering Waves are very strong links in this team. However, I do think that Chang-Li could honestly be replaced and used elsewhere. I seriously wouldn't worry about this too much if you're somebody that's going to pull for Galbrena, but you don't really want to get rid of your Chang-Li. Chang-Li is such a versatile character that can genuinely be used in such a multitude of teams that you're definitely going to find use for her elsewhere on your account if you're somebody that likes quick swapping, so don't worry about that. However, in terms of Galbrena, I do think that she honestly has the potential to replace Chang-Li here and create a stronger TOA team. I'm not sure about Whimpering Wastes. The thing is, Chang-Li is just ridiculously strong in that mode, and she suits the game mode very well. I cannot see Galbrena replacing her as easily there. However, in TOA, where damage goes above all else, I do think that the potential is honestly there, especially because in a triple fusion team, if you're not doing any quick swap shenanigans, then generally, you play a basic 1-2-3 rotation, where you swap in one to the other, and you do their on-field business before you swap back off. And in that case, Chang-Li's not really doing any of her crazy quick swapping nonsense. You just kind of on-field her, you get your stacks, you use her forte heavies, and then you leave. So, I think that Galbrena, who's being designed as an on-field DPS, could actually replace her in this role, thus power creeping her here. And I don't think that that would be too bad because, like I said, Chang-Li just has so many other teams, and replacing her in particular of a triple fusion team wouldn't really be that bad. It does hurt Chang-Li's pull value, to be fair, no longer being best in slot in such a good team, but you have to consider that Whimpering Wastes exists, and that team is just always going to really enjoy Chang-Li there. Obviously, I think that we could see a reality in which Galbrena could even replace her there, but that's something that we're gonna have to wait and see. But for Tower of Adversity, I am pretty confident that she's going to become the new strongest link in the triple fusion team. Therefore, I do think this does reduce her redundancy a little bit, because then you can justifiably get an upgrade here. I will say that even if Galbrena is an upgrade, you don't really need to feel pressured to get her to upgrade her triple fusion team, because like I said, that team is just inherently really strong at the minute, and you don't really have to get an upgrade for it, because it's already doing so well. However, that is an option for you, and oh boy, I can only imagine what the limits of this team are going to be after Galbrena releases. In terms of Brent DPS teams, he's honestly a really competent DPS after we got Lupa. The team itself is also just genuinely fun. If you have Brent's signature weapon, then you're going to be hitting quite the impressive amount of numbers on his anchor nukes. Genuinely, it's a good team. However, I do still think that Galbrena is likely to out-DPS him in this role. After all, while Brent can be a main DPS, he was never necessarily designed around it, and he definitely is a strong one whenever you use Lupa with him. However, like I said, I do still think that Galbrena is going to be stronger. So in that aspect, we could honestly be looking at the best fusion DPS in the game here. To be fair, I didn't actually doubt that she was going to be a very strong fusion hypercarry. I did doubt her overall pull value, simply because we have so many options now, and the thing is, because our options for fusion are just so strong at the minute, there's not really a major necessity to go out of your way to get her. But just because she's not a necessity doesn't mean that she's not going to be very strong. I honestly don't doubt that she is going to impress us all whenever it comes to your performance. So I do think that if you're somebody that's just looking for general upgrades to your fusion teams, Galbrena is going to provide that in spades. Obviously, you don't really have to play her with the fusion teammates. We're eventually going to get Choyuan, who's likely to become her new best in slot teammate, considering that he's the echo skill damage buffer guy. And she, of course, is the DPS who appreciates that a lot. Now, granted, maybe you have a Furlova on your account that would like to swipe up your Choyuan instead. However, if not, then there you go, you can just use him with your Galbrena, but either way, you have options with her. And I do believe that if you give her Cho Yuen, well, she's obviously going to be the best fusion hypercarry available to you then, because, well, like I said, 2.x DPS, good hypercarry, has a good best-in-slot team, and the nice thing with pulling Cho Yuen is that you're generally pulling less 5 stars than you would if you were going out of your way to build a full triple fusion team. She's also going to be running alongside Lupa, so if you have a lot of Astrites, you can even pull both of them and run competent teams such as Galbrena, Mortefi, and Lupa. You generally just have a lot of good options. And that's another thing. Her release is only bolstering the value of Lupa further. Genuinely, I think that Lupa is quite an underrated unit. She is so good for fusion. I think a really good way to put it into perspective is that it's not even just that getting Lupa means that your fusion teams are better now. It's getting her means that you really should invest into fusion at this point. Like, she is busted, and I really want to emphasize that. So, I would say that Lupa's definitely worth your pickup as well if you're able to get Galbrena. Get Galbrena first, obviously, because she's more self-sufficient, and Lupa on her own doesn't do much. That was not me saying go get Lupa without any fusion characters to use her with. That is obviously just a silly idea. I was more so just trying to put into perspective how it's the fusions that serve her, honestly. She is really good. Very underrated unit. So don't sleep on her. If you feel like you don't really have any teammate options for her, well then there you go. But of course, like I said, you can always just wait for Cho Yuen instead, and end up with Galbrena's best-in-slot team. So all around, you definitely have options with her, and she's going to be very strong. As for whether she's going to be power creeping anybody else in general, I don't really think so. I think that, if anything, she's going to be on par with the other really strong DPSs that we have right now. I think that if she ends up being worse in wuwa, she could end up being more strong in single target and TOA and such, or maybe she's going to be like the other DPSs we've gotten, where they're just generally quite good in both game modes. We'll have to wait and see. The thing is, the standard of DPSs is so high at the minute, but even if she is better than the rest of them, it's probably not going to be by that much, because after all, Wuthering Waves is just a really well-balanced game, I found. And secondly, we don't really get crazy major power creep in this game. I would say that the main time where we got a huge jump up in power level was whenever Cardathea released. And yeah, of course, that was the Sentinel Resonator. That was something that basically everybody was expecting. And you can argue Jinshi in 1.1 as well, but once again, Sentinel Resonator. And the game was extremely new at that point, so any busted character or character that was just remotely good was going to feel absolutely broken at that point. But either way, you get the idea. I don't necessarily think that she's going to completely, whoa, oh my goodness, rock the ground with how amazingly strong she is compared to everyone else, but I think she's definitely going to be good. And if she is on the level of some of the greats like Zani and Cardathea, then that's awesome. And I do think that she definitely has the capability to reach those highs. I'm just saying don't be FOMO'd into pulling for her over damage alone, because we have so many characters that can do damage at this point, and I don't really want to say that she's going to power creep any one unit. When it comes to wuwa power creep, or whether a unit's going to replace one, it's better to look at their individual roles and individual attributes. For example, Augusta power crept Chang Li Yao. That is a really clear comparison to make, because Augusta is a good electro DPS, and whenever you have her, you're not really going to be going for another electro DPS for a while. You have that covered, and your Chang Li Yao has officially been replaced, because there is no longer really a reason for you to play Chang Li Yao unless you're a really big fan of him or something like that. With power creep comparisons, you just always gotta narrow it down. There's no point in making really broad takes on power creep, because that just doesn't really work for this game. And I find that generally, you just kind of want to get a good DPS of each element, or not even each element, just enough elements, and then you're going to be fine. So in terms of overall power creep, I really wouldn't worry about that much, because that just doesn't really matter. Ultimately, you're getting characters that can fulfill their individual roles well, and I think Galbrena is definitely going to be able to fulfill her role well. I don't see why not, and I'm personally interested to see how she develops throughout the existence of Wuthering Waves' meta. Do I think that she's going to develop into an even stronger unit over time? Never say never, but I'm not exactly sure. After all, we are getting Cho Yuen soon, that's going to be your best-in-slot teammate, and she has really strong options in the fusion teams. So all around, she's going to be very strong, and I do think that she's going to replace Chang Li specifically. And what does this mean for Chang Li? Well, like I said, I do think this does decrease Chang Li's pull value, because after all, she's not going to be the definitive best-in-slot in her team anymore, and investing into Galbrena over Chang Li means that you get a strong hypercarry from 2.x, but it's likely to last for a very long time. However, I will add that Chang Li's just a really good pull in general, because if you're a high-skill player, then you can use her basically anywhere. And that level of effective versatility is fantastic, because ultimately, you can just use her anywhere, and you're going to be able to save vigor on other teammates and such. It's awesome, not to mention being able to access really high performance levels with her. So all around, this doesn't really brick Changli, and it ends up spelling good news for Galbrena fans. So all around, it just ends up being a win-win situation. Is she power creeping any other fusions? I mean, Encore's already been power crept for a while. She's still a good standard DPS though, and Brent DPS is more of a fun team. It's definitely a competent team that you can take more seriously now, especially that we have Lupa here. However, you're still going to ultimately be playing Lupa into Brent, into then Galbrena, if you're going to play a triple fusion team with Galbrena. So ultimately, what's changed? You're still going to be getting a lot of damage out of everyone involved. So all around, I think it's a win-win situation, and just another good balancing move from Kuro Games. Hopefully this video is able to tell you whether Galbrena is huge power creep or not. This has been Juice, signing out, and good luck on your Devil Hunter polls tomorrow.